Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of experiencing domestic violence that this podcast was created. By traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. You can join our community of storytellers by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, signing up for my newsletter, following me on Instagram, and more. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance. Episode 63 of The Human Experience is Paola's story. Originally from Bulgaria, Paola knew from a young age that she wanted to travel and to experience different parts of the world. She took every opportunity presented to her. After she and her husband settled in London, they knew they wanted to have a family, but Paola wanted to make sure that her career as an artist was established first. Once they did start trying to have children, Paola would experience heartbreaking miscarriages, but due to the constraints of the health system, she was not able to figure out why. Paola started seeking out alternative avenues and private doctors to address her inability to carry to term. It was through this journey that she was able to bring 2 sons into the world. But her health journey would not stop there. After her son was exhibiting developmental delays, Paola once again sought alternative medicine to help him. After years of advocating for herself and her children, Paola is finally in a place to focus on her art once again. A brief trigger warning before we begin, this episode contains conversations around infertility and infant loss. This episode was recorded in London, England. Is it Paola?
Paola.
Paola. All right, good. I haven't gotten them all right on the first try.
That was fine, just Paola. But however you pronounce it, everybody pronounces it differently.
Yeah. But it matters how you pronounce it. That's what I want to try to do.
It's funny, I'm Bulgarian, so I pronounce it Paola, but nobody here can pronounce that harder. So Paola, like the Italians.
Okay. So you don't actually pronounce it with an L.
I have learned to pronounce it with an L, but obviously like the first half of my life, I didn't.
It was Paola.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, interesting.
I don't
have the accent. Yeah. I don't have the proper accent, but okay, that's really cool, actually. I didn't realize that. So you are from Bulgaria originally. We are recording in London, but you're originally from Bulgaria. You live in the London area.
I do. Yeah. I live in Reading, but I've lived in South London until last year.
Okay. So when did you move from Bulgaria?
I was 18. So just after high school, I moved to Israel first.
Wow.
Yeah. It was before all the turmoil and wars. It was actually a good period. So I lived there for a few years. I studied in an art college there and then decided that I was going to move away and pursue a career in web design and communications and multimedia. So I moved to the Netherlands.
Okay.
I lived in Rotterdam for a few years where I studied at the Willem de Kooning Academy. Met my boyfriend, now husband there. And then we lived in The Hague for a year, near The Hague.
Nice.
Then in Amsterdam. And after that, we moved here.
I visited Amsterdam for the first time last year. I really enjoyed it.
It's lovely, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a really nice city to visit.
Yeah, I agree. It's worth the hype that it gets. So, the Netherlands, I feel like makes sense because of the career path you chose. Why did you originally move to Israel? What was it about Israel that?
My grandmother was Jewish.
Okay.
And I could move there to basically explore my heritage. I was not brought as a religious Jew or as a Jew at all. I'm actually baptized, so I was brought as an Eastern Orthodox. And then when I became older, I was like, well, I have to explore that side of my life as well and meet my family. I have family there who are Jewish and born there and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to go there and see how it goes. And my parents supported that. So I did.
That's really neat. So your grandmother, which side?
On my mother's side. So I am halaktically Jewish.
Okay. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So then I could make Aliyah, which is to immigrate because all the Jewish people are allowed to go back to Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I got a lot of support to be there and study and learn the language. I met a lot of people. and made a lot of friends, and it was lovely. And I'm still a bit confused about my religion. So I guess I've decided that I'm mostly not religious, because neither of that was by choice.
Yeah.
But I am quite spiritual in a way. And I like to explore both sides of my family.
Sure. Well, I mean, your ancestry is a big part of you, right? So regardless of what your religious affiliations are, it's worth it to pursue what your heritage is.
Yeah, exactly. So that was a big part of it.
Yeah. Very cool. So what was it like growing up in Bulgaria? I have not been. I've been to a lot of Eastern Europe, but not Bulgaria yet.
Yeah, you were just there, weren't you? So it was weird. I was born during the time of communism in a family of artists, which probably is the reason why I became an artist. My father's a sculptor. My mother's an artist and a designer. So I was kind of surrounded by their creative friends and other artists, and grew up in this world which was both bohemian and communist. So it was strange, because some things were just not allowed. There were things you couldn't say, and I remember that. The regime changed when I was 9, I think, or started to change. We went through like a lot of difficult periods. There was no food, there was no electricity. You had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go and queue for bread for like 2-3 hours. Things like that. It was different than your average childhood.
I imagine so. Yes. Yeah. And that is a really interesting juxtaposition that you lived through, in that you were in a family of creatives and artists. And so there is a very much of a communal aspect to creativity, right? And then being in communism and, having such strict boundaries placed on what you were allowed to do and stuff. So yeah, that's very interesting. So what was it like after communism fell? I'm sure, it wasn't like the next day. It was fantastic.
Well, people could travel outside of the Eastern Bloc, because before that you could only travel within the Eastern Bloc, and you had to get special permission to go to America, for example. So I could go. Because of the Jewish side, I have had family in New York. So as a teenager, I could go there and spend a month, which was nice. They could come and visit now. So both my family from Israel and from America could come to Bulgaria, which was really cool. I could finally meet them.
Yeah.
We could wear trendy clothes. We did not have to wear a uniform anymore at school. There was a movement towards like not wearing uniforms and not complying with these ideas, which a lot of children in Western Europe and here in the UK wear uniforms at school. My children wear uniforms, but at the time in Bulgaria, we're like, okay, no more uniforms. So for me, as a child, these were some of the things, like we could have Lego and we could have Barbie dolls and we could have all of these things that we didn't have before.
Yeah.
We could listen to any music we wanted to.
And were you aware of that stuff before, or was it all new?
To an extent, I was aware of it because of the family abroad. But I was quite young. I was 9 when things changed. So I knew that certain things you couldn't say, or there was this situation where, you might tell your friends, but they might, kind of give you up to the powers that be, and you might just disappear.
Yeah.
So I knew that there were things that, you kind of like didn't do and say, but not really clearly.
Yeah.
I was very little.
Yeah. It was your normal. It was all you knew.
That was my normal. We had a lot of visitors, friends of my grandparents from Eastern Germany. So I remember there was this love story of a guy from Germany, from Eastern Germany, and a Russian lady. And they used to come and meet every year in the summer in Bulgaria by the seaside. And then one year she didn't come.
Oh, no.
No, I don't actually know what happened.
Okay.
I think she was fine. I think they met again. And eventually she went to Germany because she couldn't. Stuff like that. But, there was this thing about like you could meet in Bulgaria if you came from the different countries. And then with Eastern Germany, you knew that they had like more and different things than we did in Bulgaria. But they still didn't have what the people in Western Germany did.
Sure.
It was, like bits and glimpses I caught pretty much in the way I'm saying it, like, oh, like you could do this.
Yeah. Kind of a bit of awareness, but a lot of it, like we already said, was your normal. Like you didn't know anything else. So,
well, yeah, I mean, I was a happy child. I had a stable family. My father, actually, artists could have an additional property, for example, because they needed a place to work.
Oh, wow.
Because they had like free profession and they got paid a little bit better than the average person. So I was, I had like a fairly stable life. I had my grandparents to look after me. I went to school, all the usual normal things, but then what they taught you at school was probably different.
Right. That's super interesting. I didn't realize that you would earn more money being an artist.
Well, you did then, because it was not structured. You didn't have a job. You worked for yourself, which was not really a thing that you did in communism much, right? So everybody had the same.
Interesting. Yeah, wow. Just so obviously different from what I grew up with or what I knew. Really, really interesting. So you moved when you were 18. Have you been back to live in Bulgaria since you left? Okay.
No. So it's half my life now that I haven't lived there.
Yeah. So was that when you left, did you kind of know I'm never coming back here, or has it just worked out that way?
I suspected that I was leaving to build a new life. I had never been to Israel before, so I didn't know what it would be like. I quite fancied the idea of moving to New York because I had really liked it there.
Yeah.
But I never did.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I'd do. I wanted to explore the world, and suddenly I could. So why not?
I love that. Yeah. Why not? Exactly. So you studied in the Netherlands.
Yes.
And then you moved after the Netherlands. I'm sorry, where did you move after the Netherlands?
To London.
To London. Okay. So yeah, how was it kind of in Israel? You were going there to seek out your family history, but I imagine still there was some culture shock coming from a completely different community and culture. What was your kind of first impressions moving to a new country as a foreigner?
Well, the Israelis are very open and very direct, to the point that you might say they're rude. I don't think they mean it in that way, but they are very, very direct. So in Bulgaria, we are not like the British. We don't say, please, thank you, would you, for everything, right? You don't bump into somebody and they tell you they're sorry.
Yeah.
We're just, a bit like those, like say the Roman cultures, like the Italians. We are loud, we speak over each other, we sound like we might be arguing, which we're not, but we might sound like it. However, the Israelis are like a level above.
Okay.
So it was a bit of a shock. I was like, wow, okay. I could fit in. I think a lot of people do fit in that come from Bulgaria, probably because, we're also quite warm and loud and emotional and all of those things. I liked it because it was the first time I was on my own. I could do whatever I liked. It was before, it was a peaceful period, so I could go partying a lot. I met people from all around the world. I had a really good friend from India. We lived together for a while. I have a really good friend from those days who was British, but originally from South Africa. I met some Americans, obviously the Israelis, lots of Russians, other Bulgarians, but I went with the group. It was an organized thing in the beginning.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was facilitated by the Jewish organizations that helped you out get the documents and everything.
Gotcha.
So we were in a kibbutz for the first half a year to learn Hebrew, which most of us didn't because we were too busy partying.
Yeah, is that a requirement?
No, but it's nice to speak the language of the country you live in.
Sure.
Now in Israel, almost everybody speaks English, so you can get around.
Yeah, but it is nice. It is
nice, or at
to
least understand.
Yeah, for sure.
It's a completely different language. They write differently. They speak different. The accent's different. The grammar's quite easy compared to other languages, but everything else is like, oh my God.
Well, that's true too. Learning a new alphabet does change the game a little bit as well.
Yeah.
So,
and of course they write from right to left. So,
yes.
So all the books are in reverse.
Yeah, that takes a lot of getting used to, for sure. So why then the Netherlands? What brought you? I mean, I know school, but why did you decide to go there for school?
It's another random decision.
They seem to be working out quite well for you.
Some are, some less so, mostly fine. You know, when you follow your gut, there's this thing. This is when you make the right choices, and when you don't, it's probably not. But a friend of my mother's, her son was studying at the Willem de Koning Academy, and he was like, well, I really like it here. And she was like, well, you know, there's this school in Holland. It's like, okay, I'll have a look, I'll apply. And by that time, it had been the second Intifada. So there were bombs every day. I was getting like a bit scary. And she was crying on the phone every day. I was like, okay, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to check out something else. So I did. And I ended up in Rotterdam. It was completely different again.
Yeah.
The Dutch are very different. They fancy themselves as direct, but they're nothing like the Israelis.
They fancy themselves as direct. That's fabulous.
I mean, they do. They are known to be the more direct among the European cultures, the Western European ones. So it was different because they have this, culture of individualism. Which is very, very different from where I come from and from Israel, where there's communities and you're really close with your family and you're really like close with your friends and you're always with somebody. With the Dutch, you have to make an appointment 2 weeks in advance. I'm like, I can't do that. You want to see me? Just drop by.
Yeah. That's a really interesting...
So that was much more of a culture shock for me, weirdly, than going to Israel, where things are like, okay, let's just like get in the car and go.
Yeah. I mean, I've not been to Israel. I'm not super familiar with the culture in terms of like what is in the country and how people are in the country. So I had no idea. That's really interesting that it was a really parallel move for you. And then I do understand what you're saying with the more West you get, the more individualistic it gets. And so that must have been a very jarring experience to go from big community, lots of people to, was it, isolating?
I went to university, so I met a lot of young people. So, it was not that hard for me, being a fairly young white girl. It's fairly easy to integrate. I spoke English quite well. I managed. But it was, I think once I was out of university, it's when it became harder because it became harder to make those friendships that are easier to make at uni.
Yeah. When you have a built-in community like that.
The Dutch, they tend to keep their friends separate. So their friends from school and their friends from university and their friends from work. So they don't mix as much as other people do.
Yeah.
And then it's like a bit harder to meet their friends and stuff like that.
Sure. So you might meet one person, but
they might not necessarily introduce you to their friends from high school who have not been introduced to their friends from work.
Right.
So for me, it was like, okay, so where do I go now?
So how do I meet more than one person at a time kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I think, as an American, there's a lot of that I feel like I'm used to because we can be the same way in that very much like individualized and we have our pockets of people, but it's not all integrated all of the time. And but I imagine coming from a culture where it's not like that, it would be very isolating to then try to figure out where is my community, long term kind of thing. So you met your husband at university.
I did.
Yeah. So that's good. You had him.
I had him.
Yeah. And where is he from?
He's Dutch.
Oh, okay. Great.
Yeah, he's from Delft.
So how is that? You guys are really coming from two different kinds of cultures. How did you kind of integrate together?
Well, I think when you're really young and you meet somebody who's quite different from you.
Yeah.
You know, he was very stable. I was like, oh yeah, can I just go party all the time? There's attraction to that.
Sure.
So it worked really well for a very long time.
Good.
And then it got serious. Like we were together all the time. And we moved in together. We moved to Rijswijk, which is just outside of The Hague together. And then to Amsterdam. And then I was like, okay, you know what? It's moving from one town in Holland to the next is harder than moving from one side of the world to the other. So I can't stay here.
Okay.
And that's the main reason why we left. And he got a job offer initially in America, but we thought that was really far.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided that London and the UK is common ground.
Yeah.
Kind of like we both spoke the language. It's not far from Bulgaria. It's very near Holland. So,
yeah, kind of an even playing field for both of you. It was new for both of you.
Yeah, it was really easy to move because the UK was still in the European Union.
Yeah.
So moving was kind of like, and no bureaucracy a lot. We had to get married at the time. So the Dutch, being all individualist and advanced in the way they do relationships and everything, it was allowed at the time to have a partnership. Okay. Because of the whole gay community and stuff, they were allowed to have partnerships, which was, I think, maybe the case in the UK or not yet at the time. But here, for example, you couldn't have a partnership as a heterosexual couple at the time. However, in Holland, you could. So we did that. My mother didn't speak to me for like, I don't know, at least a month after that.
Because she's Eastern Orthodox?
She's with the Jewish side, but she's herself Eastern Orthodox, and my family is much more traditional. It's like, what are you doing? You should get married. We should have a wedding. I'm like, okay, right. We are not doing that. So we did the partnership in Holland. And then before we moved to the UK, we turned it one Friday morning. You could just go to like the city council and sign. We went and signed and turned it into a marriage.
Okay.
And then my mother was like, what are you doing? So then we had a big party in Bulgaria. We invited a lot of friends and she organized everything. And we had a week of celebration like we should have from the start.
There you go. So mom was happy. Fantastic. So you moved to the UK and when did you guys decide to start a family?
Well, he started working in his new job and I decided that I was going to paint again. So I started painting. I started exhibiting a lot. In the beginning, I think the first 1 or 2 years I exhibited a lot. Like in the first year I had 2-3 events a month, which was really, really hard. And then I started organizing my own larger events because I felt that that's an easier way to progress rather than applying to awards and other people's exhibitions and just being one of the artists.
Sure.
And I did that for a while. I did quite well. And then because you know how we women think that we should have a career before we have a family, to have something to go back to. Well, that's not how it worked out for me. But I thought that logically that's what I should do. So I did that. And then I started trying for a baby. And it was really easy for me to get pregnant. But then I miscarried. I had an early miscarriage. So then we tried again and I had another early miscarriage. And I was like, okay, what's going on? Like, this isn't going well. So in the UK, you need to have at least 3 miscarriages before they put you on the path for recurrent miscarriage and you can have tests and things, which I thought was really traumatic and it didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I don't want to put myself through this again. So I have to find what's going on. And that meant that I had to go private because in the UK, you've got the NHS. So there's a national health system. I think in America, you have maybe something similar like the Medicare.
Yeah.
But
it's
it's not,
a lot harder to access, but yeah.
Yeah. So in America, everything's private and you probably just get the test. So here I had to find a private doctor. We paid for it because it wasn't covered by the insurance because, it wasn't the third miscarriage and stuff.
Wow.
So she gave me some ideas of how I can access tests, as well as some suggestions as to what might be happening to me. So I started having like about 1 million tests. And I told them, I remember it was like one of my big disappointments in the healthcare system here anyway, but probably in many places around the world. I did, for example, tell them that we have a history of Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune condition, which is known to affect pregnancy and conception and all of those things. And they weren't even going to test me for that because you have to test for antibodies. It's quite a specialized test. So when I was in the hospital, they were doing a trial. They didn't offer it to me, weirdly, but there was like a little A4 exactly above my chair.
Oh.
So I was like, okay, well, can I get on that trial? And they were like, well, it's probably not for you because you don't have bulging eyes and you're quite thin. And at the time I was really thin. I was like, you don't look like you've got thyroid issues. I'm like, that's not how it works, people. Like, you're the doctors. Why am I having this conversation? I want to get on the trial. So they did the tests. And it turned out that my antibodies were so high, I didn't even qualify for the trial.
Wow.
Basically giving thyroxine to women who want to conceive and have miscarriages. So then again, I had to find a private doctor, which was quite difficult because this is not a typical way to medicate women in the UK. It is in America, weirdly, but we had not reached that level at the time here. So I did that. In the process, I had another miscarriage. And then I got on the medicines. I changed my diet. I did a lot of research. I did some alternative things. I did some mainstream things. And then I ended up having 2 healthy pregnancies, basically one after the other, which I'm telling you this because there's so many women, like they come and tell you like, well, we don't know, or it happens, or this or that. But the thing is, when things like this happen to a woman my age at the time, there's a reason. It doesn't just happen again and again and again.
Right.
And they might not even, basically because of budgeting reasons or whatever, do all the tests or try to find all the reasons. So there's a lot of women left heartbroken all the time. And for me, discovering that I have Hashimoto's, I was like, okay, I have to find the root cause of that. And I have to find the root cause of my miscarriages and my health issues. And I rely on myself on this. It means that I have to stay up at night and paint less and maybe work less because I don't have that support by the doctors.
Wow. Yeah. That is so sad to hear about the 3 miscarriage rule because that is extremely traumatic. And then to make women wait to even start to look for an answer is really difficult. Well,
yeah, because you could have 3 miscarriages, but if they're not one after the other, so if you have 2 miscarriages, a baby, and then another miscarriage, you don't qualify for those tests either.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot of, with Hashimoto's, for example, the levels of the thyroid hormones and antibodies fluctuate. So I know my mother had 2 miscarriages and then she had me and then she had a miscarriage. Now she wouldn't have qualified for a test like this, but we know now that she does have Hashimoto's. So perhaps that was the reason. Right. And I have this family history. I told them about it.
Yeah, nothing.
No.
Wow, that's so discouraging. Because it's such a vulnerable time anyway, even if it's healthy, right? Even if you're completely healthy the entire time, you're still very vulnerable because it's something new. It's something, it's a big life change. And then to have it go wrong multiple times and to basically be told like, we don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really, really difficult. And I agree. I think, obviously I'm not a doctor, but I do agree there has to be a reason. And I've had other women on the podcast talk about their miscarriages and trying to get help and trying to find out what the problem was and going to multiple doctors and doing all of that. And it's so, again, it's layers of trauma because you've got being pregnant is its own thing. Again, even if it's completely healthy, it's a completely healthy pregnancy. And then you've got things that could go wrong. You've got external factors happening as well in your life. Like your life doesn't stop while you're pregnant. So,
exactly.
It's a lot for women to carry.
Yeah. Well, we have to because that's our lives. But nowadays it shouldn't be this hard.
Correct. Yeah, agreed. What was your feelings when as you were walking through this? Obviously, you were upset and discouraged, but was there anger? What were your feelings?
A lot. I mean, I'm over that now because obviously life has moved on a lot. But yeah, I was angry.
Yeah.
Because I did have some thyroid tests before that, for example, with the GP. And she was like, yeah, your tests are normal, but they really weren't in the optimal levels for conception, for example, because the levels have to be different. I didn't know that. I never thought that, well, my job is to do these things. I go to the doctor and they tell me and I trust them. So I've lost all that trust. Now I research everything because I went through that long, big process that was very painful, and it did make me very, very angry for a while.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Well, it's probably for the better considering what happened with my child, but because I had this experience, like I'm gonna do it on my own. Now I'm gonna fix it. But at the time, it was very, very dramatic and discouraging, and
yeah. What? So your first pregnancy that you carried to term, how were you feeling during that? I mean,
I was scared.
Yeah.
I was so scared all the time.
I mean,
like literally every single day, I was like, okay, another day passed. So then you get to 20, whichever week, which is the day that, after that, if you have a miscarriage, they can potentially save the baby. I'm like, okay, huge relief. Then you go to 8 weeks and you go like, okay, now if the baby is born, it's probably okay. Yeah. Even though it'd be hard. And then it's, like every single week, every single milestone was so hard. I had so many tests all the time because at this point I had like my private consultant. I was like, we're not doing that without a consultant. I had still the NHS treatment. I had the extra tests. I was like, I'm going I'm going to have extra ultrasounds, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, every single step was difficult. It was emotional. I was tired. Obviously, I had the pregnancy symptoms and I was getting bigger and I'm like quite small, but baby was big.
Yeah.
So, and I was like, I'm going to have an elective C-section. I don't want to push no babies, which is in the UK, it's like people typically go for the natural option. I was like, I'm not doing that and I'm not going to be made to feel guilty. I'm not losing this baby. They're getting it out in 5 minutes. And,
yeah. I feel
because,
like
the birth is also, it could be 2-3 days of struggle and the baby could get damaged. Like, I'm not doing that. We're paying however much money we have to pay, but they're getting him out in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I think that makes so much sense based on what you've already been through and how, again, it is, birth is trauma. It's physical trauma to your body, but it's also a very emotional, psychological experience. And again, that's just everything goes according to plan. But to have this in the back of your mind that something's going to go wrong. Something's, you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. You're waiting for something to happen. I mean, it's just, I can't imagine going through a full pregnancy like that. It just must be so hard. And unfortunately, so many women do. So many women struggle with it.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting too, because it's one of those things where we talk about birth and we say it's the most natural thing in the world. And it is, but also there is so much risk. There is so much that could and does go wrong. And we still have to look after women in, their physical, emotional, and mental well-being through the whole process. It can't just be, oh, well, they're doing what their bodies were made to do.
Yeah, well, in an ideal world, but for some reason, that's not how it works for a lot of women.
Right.
Of course, in an ideal world, you push the baby out and go home. And that does happen to many women. Nowadays, they send you home on the same day if you have an uncomplicated natural birth. But of course, there is, like you said, all the emotional stuff, the depression for some women after they have the baby. And to be honest, we make a really big deal around natural birth, but the hard part starts after, because you have this tiny human and you need to keep them alive, and you need to keep them fed, and they wake up every 2 hours at night, and they cry for milk every however often. In my time, probably yours, they used to feed us on a schedule of 3-4 hours, but we don't do that anymore because the babies get hungrier more often. So we feed them on demand. That's incredibly demanding on the mother, regardless of whether you're breastfeeding or bottle feeding.
Yeah.
Because all the time.
Yes.
And everything, every step is new with your first child. How am I going to bathe the baby? Should I bathe the baby or should I leave the baby not bathed for a week? Because, there's this recommendation. Should I keep the cord blood or not? Should I, all these choices. But after that is when it gets really hard, when you have to bring them up.
Yeah.
It's such responsibility for another human being. It's
it's one of those things, again, I think we look at, our view of it is so weird as human beings, because it is the biggest thing that you can do is to raise another, it's the biggest responsibility you can have, right? It's to raise another human being. But we're just kind of yep, okay, and now you're parents.
Yeah, now you're parents. Now you go back to work.
Yeah.
But, especially in America, I think quite often, women are sent back to work, in a few weeks.
Yeah.
Here, a lot of women stay home for a year or two. So that's good for the baby and good for the mother. But there's this expectation of women that we're going to be mothers. We're going to take this responsibility, which is really a lot on the mother in the first few years and less so on the father. Of course, they help. They do some feeding. If you bottle feed, they can bathe the baby, but it's mostly on the mom. And the babies want the mom the most. And then there's the expectation that at some point you've recovered now. So go back to
life
doing
as normal.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
Yeah, exactly. So,
it is a really interesting and difficult. Again, I'm not a mom. I've never been pregnant, but I can only imagine, and it's difficult because I think women should have the ability to work. They should have the ability to have a career and have children if that's what they want. But I also believe that there's room for us to make it to balance it better.
Well, here's one of the reasons why I think I did it wrong, because having a baby in your 20s is much easier on your body. You're healthier, you recover faster, you can do the sleepless nights better. And then they're more grown up by the time you're, say, 35. You can still have a career. It's much easier to have a career than to have children. Whereas if you have your baby at 35, it's hard. You don't stay up all night anymore and think woohoo. So my thinking is I would have preferred to have had the babies earlier. It would have been easier and I would have been, able to go back to my career full time by now.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's necessarily a wrong way to do it, but I do think that it's interesting that you can look back and say, well, you know what? Not that I am upset with how things are now, but if I could go back, I may have done things a little bit differently. I think so. Yeah. I think my thinking was it's just not what happened. And that's not how it worked for me. Yeah. Yeah. So what happened? You had your first child. And what happened with, it's a boy, right? It's a boy. Yeah. I've got 2 boys. Two boys. Yeah. That's fun. Well, whatever comes out, right? That's right. Yeah. Well, then we decided we were
we questioned ourselves whether we wanted the second baby because age and everything. It's been a couple of difficult years, and then we decided we wanted to have a second baby, so we did. And again, no issues with the pregnancy because I was on my medication. I went to like my doctors that I already knew and trusted and had chosen, and everything was mostly fine, except I developed gestational diabetes. And when the baby was born, he was quieter and he didn't cry all the time, except that he wanted to feed all the time. And if I didn't feed him, he cried the house down. I couldn't move away from him. Like the babysitter tried to rock him to sleep, and for an hour one time I remember, I was like handed him back. I have to feed him. He didn't take bottles, and by the time he was about maybe 6 months old, babies try to sit up because you can start giving them food, and he was really struggling sitting up, and he couldn't. I mean, you try to think it's gonna be fine, right? But he did things like pushing toys with his right hand into his left, so he didn't move his left side so well. His left eye didn't open completely. When he smiled, the left side of his mouth didn't go up completely. It was like little things, and everybody was like, "It's gonna be fine. Oh, there's no issues. Oh, he's just a little bit delayed. He's well within like the milestones and stuff." But you know your baby, so you start thinking like. Something's not right. And I also had a baby that developed very normally before that, maybe a bit advanced, but within the range of normal. And with my second child, some things just weren't happening as I expected them.
Yeah.
So then we went through this whole big process of trying to get support and help and a diagnosis of some sort for him. And it was really hard because people just wouldn't pay a lot of attention again, because the child has to be, for example, over 2 years old before they look at like, oh, why is he not walking?
What?
or like some of those things. Yeah. So like, but there's an issue here.
Yeah.
Like my baby can't stand. Like I would stand him up, and if I didn't support him and he was something, he would just like fall.
Yeah.
Like he couldn't even stand, couldn't find any balance. Like it was becoming quite obvious that he didn't understand speech. He couldn't say anything, didn't speak, couldn't play normally, didn't engage with toys. He was quite social, but that's probably the only saving grace, like for me to think like, okay, so he's not completely autistic, right? Because he smiles at people and he waves at people and he likes people.
Yeah.
But it was really hard because he crawled very, very late. Eventually he figured out crawling. But, by that age, my first child had been running around.
Okay.
I was like, okay, what am I going to do now? So then we had this situation, which I mentioned with my husband, basically saying he's like a vegetable, like there's, our lives are over. He just, all he ever does is lie on his back and look at the ceiling. And I was like, okay, I can't allow this to be our lives.
Yeah.
And I am going to have to, again, find the people and the support and the treatments, whether mainstream or alternative, to do something about this child. Because if he doesn't improve, what are we going to do? Like our lives would be over. My career is not going to happen at all.
Yeah.
And what is going to happen to my first child? Is he going to have to look after this one forever?
Yeah.
And I did not like that. And then generally people are like, oh, to the best of his abilities, it may be fine. It's going to be hard. We don't know. We can't find out. I was like, he clearly has left side weakness. And that is a bit like a stroke.
Yeah. When you were describing it, that's what I was thinking of.
So does he maybe have some level of brain damage from something that may have happened before he was born or after he was born? Like apparently, and I didn't know that, but babies are in the risk group for having a stroke, for example. And then we have this idea. I'm not saying that he had a stroke because we don't know. We don't have no idea, but I think it's some kind of brain damage. And so the professionals didn't necessarily engage with this so much, because we have we look at developmental delays under like a lot of the same box. Like it could be this, could be that. He was very young, so they didn't recommend doing an MRI because of the associated risks with that, having to give him anesthetics and stuff. And just as we were going to get some tests finally and some hopefully therapists, COVID hit. And there were no therapists.
Wow.
And there were no doctors. And there were no speech therapists. And there was nobody. And there was lockdown. And the babysitter again left because some of them did. Yeah. And she was like, she's Bulgarian. So she went back to Bulgaria. And I was left at home with those two children to look after on my own. And my husband stuck in a room working from home. I was like, okay, life is hell. What am I gonna do? So I found out about a therapy called the Nemechek Protocol, which is for children with autism and developmental delays and brain injuries. And it's an American doctor, and they have a huge Facebook following. And it's a very healthy protocol. It basically gives children fish oil for brain development, inulin for supporting the gut bacteria, and olive oil, which reduces inflammation. And that combination allows the brain to start healing. So within maybe 2 weeks of me giving him this, he could stand, which was a big thing, because like he felt like a plank of wood before that. It was really weird. And then he started engaging with toys. And in about a month and a half, he started walking slowly, but he started walking. And then suddenly his physical development kicked in. And very soon after, he could like run around and climb. He still has some balance issues. But, if you just see him on the street, you wouldn't necessarily say, oh, this child like can't walk or can't move his hands. Like he could smile, his eye opened, like this whole physical side of his issues resolved probably in the next 2 years almost completely. So his fine motor skills are not as good, for instance, writing and drawing, as a level of like how interested he might be in that. But before we started that protocol, you tell him touch your nose, and he didn't know what you were telling him. Like basically he had zero understanding and focus on playing with toys or anything. So once his physical development kicked in, after that, after he could do things, he started developing some interests in other stuff. So by that time, we could see some therapists, some online, and once in a blue moon, face to face. And they explained to me how to get him interested in books. So then he started being interested in stories and narratives, and he started talking. And I wouldn't say he's at the level of other children his age, because his development like literally started 2.5 years after a normal child.
Yeah.
But he's getting there. And that means that he could go to school with support, and that I could go back to having a life. But most of all, it means that he will have a future, because he's social, he's starting to make friends. Yesterday they had the school disco, and he lined up and sang a song. So every child could sing a song if they wanted to, and a lot of them didn't. So I was quite surprised that he did. Yeah. He went and very loudly, clearly sang happy birthday.
I love that.
Which was... Yeah, I thought like, well, there's a level of like fear boundaries, right? Because he doesn't necessarily understand boundaries as well as another child his age. So some got like really weirded out and crying and shy and stuff, but he just doesn't have that. So, seeing this happen, and again, there is a cause. They can't say, oh, it's maybe genetic, or maybe we don't know, or maybe that's just something happened.
Yeah.
There is a cause. And maybe I haven't found the cause. Maybe it's not brain. I think it is something to do with that. And children's brains are very flexible. So development and healing happens.
Yeah.
But it could be something else. We don't know. However, humans have the ability to heal and develop and get better. And we can't put them in a box like, oh, maybe he's got autism. Why don't we look at that? Because, everybody, there is like...
like it's a blanket,
like it's a blanket
diagnosis
thing. And I was like, oh no, we're not really gonna look at that, because he's not afraid of loud noises. He's social, he smiles, he looks at you in the eye, all of those things. That's not the diagnosis. It might overlap,
sure,
to an extent, but we're not gonna put him in a box, because he clearly had these physical issues that you're not seeing so much anymore, but he had them nonetheless. And we're gonna continue with the, I don't know, like finding what's right for him specifically. And whatever works for him.
And I think that's so necessary, because human beings, while we do have similarities, and there are, similarities in how we can be treated, we are still individuals, and we do still need different things. So you can't just cookie cutter a treatment and say, this is going to work across the board. And even with autism, I mean, I my knowledge of autism is very little, so I don't want to speak too much on it. But from what I do understand is that it's a spectrum. And so different people on that spectrum need different things too. So it's not like, even if you do have a diagnosis of autism, you still shouldn't be put in a box.
Yeah, exactly.
You still need something individual to you.
Yeah, that's specifically exactly what it is. And you have to find whatever it is that works for your specific case, of course. But I think my aha moment here was that people have an incredible ability to get better and to heal, given the right circumstances. And there is a cause, whether you find it or not. There is always a cause. It's not just something that just like fell from the sky on your head.
Right. It's not random. There's something.
Well, the cause might be random, like genetic, whatever, but there is a cause. It's not.
It's not. It didn't come from nothing.
Yeah, and that my ability to do this for him, my understanding came from basically having to deal with my own situation with miscarriages, and the fact that I could get better and could.
Yeah, and you had to seek out your own treatment because you weren't getting what you needed from the usual channels.
Yeah, so when that happened with him and around COVID, I was like, I have got to do this somehow.
Yeah.
This can't be my future, and I don't accept that, so that's what I did.
Good for you. Yeah. I mean, we have to be able to kind of take it in our own hands at some point, and be our own advocates, because nobody else is going to do it for us.
Yeah.
And I've recently, within the past year, have started with functional medicine. And I don't know if that's a term
That
here.
is a term, yeah. So the functional doctors are the ones that are better at treating things like Hashimoto's.
Yeah. So, but it sounds very similar to what you're saying, which is that it's what your son was exhibiting were symptoms, right? Like, that wasn't the cause. It was the effect of whatever was wrong. So, his developmental delay and his, physical inabilities to walk or stand, those were symptoms. They're not a cause.
Exactly.
So, so it is really interesting. And I've found a lot of validation and healing, even like just mentally healing from understanding, okay, you're not crazy. You are experiencing these things, and it's not just from nowhere. There is a reason. And even if we don't know the reason, we're going to keep looking, we're going to keep trying, we're going to keep pursuing, because it's worth finding out the root of the issue rather than trying to just keep putting out these little fires of symptoms that aren't addressing anything deeper. So I am fascinated by the protocol that you used. And how did you find this doctor? And you said he was an American, or they were an American?
He's an American doctor. I saw it on Facebook because I spent a lot of time looking at different things like hypermobility. Could that be the issue? Which apparently is to an extent. Is there how do we look at speech? What does that mean? What's the, symptoms of, say, autism? I looked at that. And then I suppose from looking at it, Facebook starts showing you things, right?
Yes.
It's like, it's like when weird. I said to my husband that I want the coat, it started showing me coats because he looked up coats on Google, type of thing. But,
it's weird, except sometimes it works out for you in your favor.
Except in this case, so I saw the group, and it was a group for like children with autism and brain damage, brain development issues, or something like that it's called. And I was going to skip it because I had by that time spoken to a couple of people and determined that autism wasn't his issue. But I saw the thing about the brain. I was like, well, I'll have a look. So I had a look at the group. I had a look at the protocol, and a lot of children with autism, they may be given strange stuff in terms of treatments that parents give them to detox them or whatever it is. But this looked very safe.
Yeah.
It's fish oil and olive oil. It's food-based.
Very natural.
Very natural. And inulin is just a prebiotic. You have it in stevia sweeteners and various, there was nothing in it that I was concerned about.
Yeah.
So I started giving him the olive oil first. And even with that, reducing inflammation, apparently, I saw some progress in the first 2-3 days, a little bit more, very, very tiny things. And I never saw the doctor because there's a book. So I bought the book. I made my husband read the book, and we just started doing the protocol. My son, he was on a diet very high on nut butters because he was almost diagnosed. He had everything that you could think of, right?
Yeah.
With peanut allergy and a hazelnut allergy.
Oh.
But we checked that very early on because, again, there's a family history in allergies. And if you check that very early, you can desensitize the child potentially.
Okay, yeah.
So we desensitized him, but he had to continue for a long time, consume very high amounts of, for his size, nut butters, peanut butter, and other allergens. And then there's omega-6 in those nuts, which is quite high for a child. And omega-6, if it's not in the right ratio of the omegas, as I found out, it increases inflammation. It's pro-inflammatory.
Okay.
So we had to decrease the omega-6 oils and increase get the ratio right, which is a thing in our society that's really off, apparently.
Apparently, yeah.
Well, yeah, processed foods and a lot of whatever oils. So it's really important for everyone to look at their diet. But, if I try to follow his diet, I don't see any difference in me. But for him, the difference is really, really huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, what was it like I imagine after going through this at the beginning and feeling really defeated and discouraged and nobody was listening to you, what was it like to discover this and to find that it actually was working?
Well, it started working really fast. So we were I remember the first time, maybe a week in or so, or 2 weeks in, he started standing, and we gave him a toy, and we put him in his seat at the table, and he played with this toy, turning it around and arranging it for 20 minutes. And this is quite a long, attention span for a child that age. But for him, he had zero attention span, none, not engaging with toys. And he was about 2 years old, right? And he's sat there playing with his toy for a long time, engaging, looking at it and rotating it in his hands and stuff. And we stood observing him, and we're like, wow.
Were you afraid to move?
Literally, we just sat there watching him. I can't remember, were we standing or sitting even, but he was sitting at the table, and I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, light at the end of the tunnel. And it was a miracle for him. It was, I think, for other children that actually do have autism, it's a much longer process. but to start feeling better. But for him, it was really quick.
Wow.
To see results. Still, like, obviously, like I said, he's not at the level of a child his age.
Sure.
But
you can see the leaps.
The leaps are amazing. Like, and they come with a lot of drama and throwing and tantrums and hitting sometimes, because there's all this brain development happening. And he's had maybe, like, I don't know, 4 leaps since the beginning of the year, of a week of basically misery.
Yeah.
But then the results are completely worth it.
Sure.
Like, he goes and sings a song in front of, like, half the school. I could not have imagined I'd see him do that. And I walked there with him. I was like, do you want to sing? He's like, I want to sing. I was like, do you really want to sing? Okay, let's. I was like, he's not going to do it. He's not. And then he did. And one of the teachers like, oh my God, he sang a song. Like, yeah. It was really strange. But I mean, it's amazing to see.
Yeah. How does his older brother interact with him?
He's really good.
Yeah.
Well, he gets fed up once in a while because it's hard. But he's really good with him, and teaches him things. He spends time showing him how to write. So apparently he showed him how to write nanny, which is what he calls his babysitter. And then he said that he wrote it almost on his own, which was, again, amazing. He knows he can count to, I think, at least 20. And he can, he knows, like, the sounds of the letters.
Yeah.
I don't know that he knows how to read, but he can put some things together, like, say, 3-letter words.
Yeah, yeah. And, it's just from where he was to now, you're just seeing growth.
Yeah, we are seeing a lot of growth. We've done other things. We've done intensive speech therapy, which I just figure it's going to work for him because I have a friend who's a speech therapist. So she just came every week for half a year to our house, spent the night and spent 2 mornings with him.
Wow.
And I appreciate that most people probably don't have that. But I was, like, really shocked that she did it, because she traveled from Bristol to London, where we lived, to South London at the time, which is probably about 2 hours at least. Well, she did that for me, which was absolutely amazing. And I didn't think that anybody would do that. For half a year she did it. And that was amazing. I think he went from, like, 4 words to maybe 10 words, or from no words to 6 words. I can't remember anymore what period, but we did see improvement of somebody who knows how to work with children, to engage them and implement these strategies in play.
Yeah.
Because I'm not, I'm not one of those women.
Yeah. I don't think, you have to be, because you can't be an expert in everything, right? So,
well, yeah, but there's the expectation that you spend the most time with your child. So you need to become a bit of a speech therapist. And neither my husband and I, it doesn't come from, you have to be one of these people that are really good with children, very caring, and know how to do this.
Yeah.
Just for me, it's not natural.
Well, and I think it's hard too, because we want parents to do the same thing as a professional is doing, but a professional gets to clock in and clock out, right? Like, you're supposed to be then dealing with the speech therapy part of it and kind of implement these things. But you have everything else going on.
Also, they don't listen to you the same way because you're their mom.
Exactly. Well, that too.
So they're like, no.
Let's be real. That is the case. But yeah, when you talk about any sort of professional or babysitter or anything, there's a period of time where they're there and they're focused on your child.
Exactly.
But then they leave. So yeah, they're able to do things because they're able to be more focused on this one particular aspect. So it's unfair for us to then turn around and say, and then parents should be doing the same level of care with their children like that.
That's very true. Yeah.
So, there's a reason that these jobs exist. So,
Yeah. I think it's true. Like, I bet that those professionals, when they go home to their children, they still have their own issues.
100%.
Because children just treat their parents differently than they would treat somebody that they don't know and are less comfortable with.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a newness to it, right? It's
Yeah.
exciting with, somebody new is coming into your life as well. So, even if you know them, I just I'm an aunt. And so when I see my nieces and it's like, they're always excited to see me, which is the best. I love that. But I also understand that the time that I'm taking care of them for a few hours at a time is not the same thing that their parents are doing. It's not the same care. And I'm happy to care for them and I love them. And it is, I do care for them when I'm with them. But it's not like an equal trade-off. It's not the same thing. So, and the way they treat me is different than the way they treat their parents. And that's always going to be the case. So,
yeah, no, it's so true.
Yeah. So, so he's 6 now?
He's 6.
Okay. And so what is education look like for him? Like, what does schooling look like for him at this point?
He gets support because we finally managed to get everything official and some documents and some funding. He does not have one-to-one support, but he does have like an extra person to basically look after him and some other children with issues. He gets to go to another classroom with a smaller classroom, basically just a few kids to learn phonics and letters and things like that. But the main thing is that he's happy. And for my other child, I'm quite ambitious academically because he can do really well academically.
Sure.
But for him, I don't think it's is as important. Like, I don't have the expectations he's going to become a professor, but so long as he's happy and he can read and has a social life,
yeah,
that's what we want from him. We want him to have a level of independence, like getting dressed and undressed and showering and all of those things, which he can do now. Just basically that's that. Education it's important to a level of like independence and being able to manage, like they don't lie to you in the shop or something like that. I should be able to put 2 and 2 together. But
yeah. To be able to function in society.
I think that's our ambitions at the moment. If he does better than that, well, wonderful. But if he gets to that point, then, we've basically achieved a lot.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, wanting to bring a level of independence to your children's lives is fantastic. And I think it only serves your children when parents prioritize that. And it's good to know your child's limits and not to hold them back from pursuing anything that they want to, but to say, we're going to walk beside you as you walk through this, and wherever, like, however far you go, however far you want to go, like, we're going to be there with you. But we're not saying this is the standard you have to meet.
Well, yeah, that, but also a child like him needs to be pushed.
Sure.
So we do have to set some standards for him, which, again, people might not do as much because they go like, oh, his interests were lying on the floor and rolling for a very long time. And I don't think that interest is like the right interest for him anymore. So we shall change his interest a little bit. We'll work on that. So I insist on having a lot of adult-led activities for him.
Yeah.
So we do stuff with him, obviously. But then the babysitters do, and speech therapists do, and the people at school do, and everybody. And I make it really clear to them that we need like adult-led activities. We need to control these activities because once you manage to engage him, he engages, but he will not be, like my older child goes and comes up with games and goes like, let's do this, let's do that. And he can't do that yet. He has started, like he'll bring me a book or and ask for a story, or he'll create. I'm really happy about that because he finally has an interest in books.
Yeah.
He'll collect his books and make a bookshop and like invite us to go and buy books from him, or he'll be like the Amazon delivery man bringing the books. So he's coming up with games now and
that's great.
Activities like that. But it took time to get him engaged and to
Sure.
to get to that level. And I think if we hadn't tried very hard, it may never have happened, because people would just let him like roll on the floor for half of them. Like, no, just stop doing that. Oh, but he needs it. No, he doesn't. He doesn't do it at home.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to do it at nursery. He doesn't need to do it at school. You know?
No, it's a great point. It's, you know, and only you would know that, right? Because you are his mom. And so it's great. I think it's wonderful that you are able to walk this line of tension and balance and say, you know, we love and accept him for who he is, and that's always going to be the case. But we also want him to learn. We want him to be independent. We want him to, you know, keep moving forward and not just say, okay, this is it. Like, this is all he's capable of either. So.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because then he's really happy to engage. He's social. He likes to play with other children, but he needs that extra help.
Yeah.
Because another child his age can't lead a game because they are also too young. Yeah. Another child, like my other child and his friends, now they can engage him in games that he will, you know, they are a bit more able to look after him in that respect.
Yeah. That's a neat transition.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fun. So, yeah, I mean, that is quite a ride to motherhood that you had.
Yeah. And it's going to continue this way, but it's become a lot easier. So I've started painting again. I've started exhibiting again. Wonderful. I've started making websites again. I have some time for myself now that he's at school. So things are just coming like back to a level of normalcy that I didn't know if I'd ever have again.
Yeah, that must be really cool to kind of be able to find yourself again after this. Do you felt like you maybe lost a little bit of yourself in wading through this? Yeah. Yeah, a lot.
I mean, I'm nothing like the girl I used to be when I moved to Israel.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the point, right? It's life changes you, for sure. Our experiences change us. But I do think that we go through seasons where, you know, sometimes we can lose ourselves in the midst of those seasons when things get really difficult. And to be able to take a step back and take a breath and now be able to pursue things for yourself is just such a gift. And I'm glad that you're able to do that now.
I need it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would have done if things had developed differently. But I do need by now to take some time for myself, like to come meet you, to be able to do these things, because for a really long time I thought I would never be able to do this again, and to have a social life and to go out to dinner, and you know, things have become much more normal.
Yeah, that's got to be. I mean, you kind of referenced this with what your husband said, but that's got to be such a discouraging place to be in, to think, okay, this is all what the rest of my life is going to look like. It's going to be very small.
Yeah, I mean, I was really shocked when he said it, but it really kind of like put things in perspective. It was probably the thing that activated me, like really like, okay, look at the seat, stop closing your eyes in front of what's happening and go do something about it. Because for a really long time, I was like, it's going to be better. It's going to get better. Maybe tomorrow's going to be a better day, right? And it didn't.
Yeah.
Until I had to like start and get up and do it.
But it's hard when everybody's telling you that too, you know? I mean, it does take a certain level of confidence and awareness to say, it doesn't matter what everybody else is saying. I'm looking at this happening in front of me and nothing's changing. So I have to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. It does mean that you have to have the self-confidence to go and tell the professionals, no, that's not what it is. And that's not how I want things to be done. And we'll look further and I'll get a second opinion. And that's what I believe, and that's what I want, and this is how it's gonna be.
Yeah.
I mean, I have these conversations, but it's like, no.
Yeah.
Just not anymore. I'm not gonna be one of those moms that are made to feel guilty or told what to do or how to bring up their children. It's just, I'm going to make these decisions because it's my life, it's my children's life, it's my family, and things are changing, therefore.
Yeah.
So, yeah. It's not easy when, you know, you're sitting with a professional and they tell you this and you tell them no.
It's not easy. It's not easy to do it in any capacity. But yeah, I imagined. Oh, yeah, that's really difficult.
I got better at it. I had to.
Well, that's true.
But you have to get like a bit of a curtain in front of your eyes. Whatever you say, but actually, it's not gonna work that way.
Good. Had you seen any doctor of the same doctors like after he started to progress? Did they kind of, see how much improvement he was making, or did you just go to different doctors?
We did see some alternative therapists and some brain development therapists. And we obviously saw my friend, the speech therapist. So she's been like basically keeping track of his progress quite a lot. She doesn't really work with him anymore, but obviously we're friends. So we see each other socially. And I think it's cool. People go like, okay, he's made a lot of progress in the last year. So I mean, it's easy to see that there is progress, but obviously in the last year we moved from London to Reading, so we're not really seeing the same doctors anymore.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, what a journey, and it's only it's really only just started. He's 6. He's got a lot of life left to live.
Yeah, but that's the exciting bit, isn't
Absolutely.
it? Now there is a journey. Now things are getting better. Now he can sing and run and yeah.
Does it make you kind of even more appreciative in a way when he does achieve those milestones?
Oh, it's incredible to see.
Yeah.
It's like yesterday. I was like really shocked, but in a very, very good way.
Yeah. That's amazing. It's really wonderful that you get to have that, after all of the work that you've done and how discouraging I imagine it must have been to be able to see him moving forward in some pretty big ways, like what happened yesterday with the song, and, big for you guys, maybe not big to anybody else's standards, but based on the life that you have lived with him thus far, it's a big deal.
Yeah, because there's so much progress to see. So, it doesn't matter whether he reaches, like the age appropriate development now, or can just do everything that 18-year-olds can do when he's 20. It just really doesn't matter. Like, I don't necessarily want to talk to anybody about academics and high school and it just doesn't matter. It has given me this perspective as a potentially a very ambitious mother that I am for my other child, and in general, that maybe this stuff isn't quite as important. It's other things in life that matter. It's the friendships, it's the love, it's the abilities to communicate and to be happy and to be independent, because you can't be very happy if you're not very independent. It's harder because everything is harder for people who can't do things, like people with disabilities and stuff. So we really want to give him that.
I love that. I love that perspective. I think it's a hard-fought and hard-won perspective for you to have, because you've been through so much, but it's a beautiful place to land for sure.
It is now, yeah.
Well, just with that perspective that, there are more important things sometimes than we focus on, and we can get caught up in really things that at the end of the day aren't necessarily what makes us human and what makes life important. So,
yeah, exactly.
So now you are, as you said, able to do some things for yourself. I am painting again. And what are your hopes for the future for you?
Well, I want to have more time for myself. I think it's really important because I've devoted all my time to him in the last few years, and obviously my other child.
Yeah.
But like, I've devoted so much of myself that, like you said, I've lost myself a little bit. So I want to find that girl again. I mean, I want to say like the confident one, but I have actually quite a lot of confidence in that process because I've had to like find it.
Sure.
But have some more time for my own friends. And in terms of work, I I want to work with other artists on supporting their career. So their online presence, their websites, that sort of thing. Because like I said, I also make websites for people, but I think it's really nice to work with other creatives.
Yeah.
And I've done that quite a bit. So I want to continue doing that.
Awesome.
As somebody who supports them, but also, of course, to develop my own artistic career.
Sure. Yeah. It's wonderful. Yeah, I agree. I do think it's important that we make time for ourselves and the things that matter to us, because we are truly better for other people when we find our own center and we, are able to flourish in our own ways as well. When we have that independence, when we have that time for ourselves, when we're taking care of ourselves, and feeding our body, mind, soul in the way that matters to us.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're happy, other people around you are happy. The people that matter anyway, your family. Like they say it about children, like, happy mom, happy children. But it's true for your partner. Like,
sure.
If a happy wife, happy husband. But also like in friendships, like if you're happier, you have less burden also for your friends and the people around you.
Sure.
And it's really important.
Absolutely. And we are responsible for our own happiness. So,
well, here, that's the big lesson that I learned, isn't it? It depends. Like a lot of these things actually depend on me, and I can take things in my hands and make them work for me in whichever way works for me, basically.
Yeah. No, it's awesome. So I do have one question that I ask everybody at the end of each show, which is, through the lens of your experience, what does compassion mean to you?
Well, through the lens of my experience, it's, I think compassion is, I've spent a bit of time thinking about that, because I recently did an exhibition which was called Compassion with the South London Women Artists I'm a member of.
Oh, wow.
I'd say it's an artist group. And we had an exhibition in near Baker Street in the Marylebone Parish Church. And we had to obviously create artwork and deliver artwork that's on the theme of compassion. And it got me thinking, I do have a series of paintings called Undercurrents. So they are about emotions and experiences and how we relate to each other. Because, well, visually you can say a lot with a picture rather than words. Of course, now we're talking a lot, but in other circumstances, in my world, we use a lot of color and shape and form and visual language. And I found that people really relate to the same emotions. I think it's human nature. It's ingrained in us to recognize these things in our faces, in our expressions, in the way we pronounce whatever it is that we're saying. Like when you laugh, I'll laugh. If I cry, you may feel a bit sad. It's very, very obvious with children. And I think we lost a lot of that with the masks during COVID. There is a lot of information on like delays of child development because of this lack of connecting with the expression of adults and learning from it. But I think it really is something that comes from inside. We relate to each other on that level, so we can all feel compassion and nurture it. Yeah,
beautiful. I have not had an answer like that before, and I really appreciate. No, I love it. I love it. Okay. I mean, I ask the question because everybody has a unique perspective on it,
Yeah.
But probably. With your background as an artist, I just think that the visual component of compassion, that is such a beautiful way of putting it. So I really like that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, you have been a pleasure to talk to. I love your story. I love just your energy where you are and what you have done for yourself and your children and your family. I just think it's really admirable and inspiring. And yeah, I hope other people kind of hear this and choose to do the same for themselves. So thank you
so much.
And good job on your first podcast. You did it.
I did it.
Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also support the podcast financially by going to my website, thehxpod.com, linked in the show notes, and clicking on Donate. It takes a lot of time and resources to create this podcast, so every little bit helps. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love well.